right? If you're dealing with buyers in the first-time home price point,
they definitely are.
Based on today's interest rate and based on the price points, right, at $300,000, $400,000, you're going to get asked, and there's a good chance you're going to get asked for closing cost contribution.
The last one we went to was over in Indianapolis.
Like a per hour hotel? Was it that
Yeah,
bad?
it was kind of per hour. Yeah, it was sort of that. There was like people out, literally, it was like they were tailgating in the parking lot. They had a huge boom box. It was super loud. They're out there grilling and stuff. It was different.
You are now listening to the Real Estate Heavyweights Podcast.
You see this guy here staring back at you? That's your toughest opponent. Every time you get into the ring, that's who you're going against. I believe that in boxing, and I do believe that in life.
Your weekly deep dive into DFW real estate, life, and beyond. With your hosts, Tavis Westbrook and Ashton Hines.
Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Heavyweights Podcast. I'm Ashton Hines, part of the Real Estate Heavyweights, the newbie, the guy who's flipped 4 houses, who still works a full-time job as a physical therapist assistant in home health, and who also is trying to learn the business and be a realtor. I've been super active as a realtor. We'll get into that here in a little bit lately, but I've been able to do more and more real estate, less and less therapy, and we're making that transition. I'm transitioning. I'd like to announce that I'm transitioning from a therapist to a real estate professional. So the person that's helping me in my transition, who's guiding me along the way, is my friend, other half of the Real Estate Heavyweights, Tavis Westbrook. What's up, Tavis?
Good morning. What's up, man? It's always good. We look forward to this every week, so it's good. Here we are.
I do look forward to it. It's a lot of fun. This is episode 34. We're trying to get our interviews kicked back up. We've got people on the sidelines. We've got some people lined up. We had some technical difficulties. We actually had a whole interview that we did that just fell away. It didn't record. Well, it recorded us. It just didn't record our guest after the 5-minute mark.
That was so bizarre.
Yeah. And then we have another one. I know. And then we have another one, as a good friend of yours, who would be a great interview. And he's having a hard time on his technical side of things because his company blocks the site computer that we need to use. So anyway, we've had that, but we've got several really cool ones lining up, and I've made some contacts with some folks that I'm friends with and friends of friends, and I'm excited about the interviews we haven't come up. But speaking of interviews, so little preview. We interviewed our friend Jack with iFund Cities. He's a hard money lender. He's down. I had said, hey, could you do this Wednesday? And he's out of town. He's down in McAllen, and he went to a builder's meeting yesterday. And just take a guess as to the price per square foot he says that they're building it. And some of those houses are nice. I don't know if you watch them on Instagram, but some of those new builds down in the McAllen area are really nice. And it's like they're kind of clickbaity because it's like, oh, you can get this house for under $500,000 in Texas. Well, it's like out in the middle of nowhere, but so guess what he mentioned the price per square foot that they're building at down there.
What's that?
75.
Holy cow. I remember that day. That was like 10 years ago when we could do that.
Right. But he says it's labor and the actual materials. There's just less shipping costs. A lot of the materials are coming from Mexico. And so it's just less distance, less gas, all the stuff. And
got it.
So they can build these beautiful houses and they look amazing on Instagram, these wide open, modern-y houses for really cheap. So he's down there trying to pick up some business. We'll get Jack on sometime soon and, get going. So I want to give a shout out to a friend of the show. He's a loyal listener. He listens while he works out. My friend Rob, he's a pastor over in the Flower Mound area. He's doing his first flip right now, and he's listened to, I think, almost every episode that we have, if not every one. And I've had dinner with him. So I want to give him a shout out, give him a little bit of encouragement because they did their first flip. I walked it. They did a really nice job. And they were excited because they got a full price offer really early on, but they rescinded it before it was accepted and all this. It didn't even go into the option period. So you kind of had that carrot put out in front of you. And then I think it's been a little over a week. They had another lowish offer. and it's one of those heartstrings ones, you know, where it's like FHA, and this family loves the house. The agent's already kicking in part of his commission to help with closing costs. And, you know, I know Rob's heart. He wants it. I'm sure he wants it for that family, you know,
Yep.
but then like they're going to lose money or, you know, barely make any money if they take this offer. And so I know it can be really frustrating, and you've been through that, you know, that offer dance, you know, several times. So do you have any advice for Rob and his partner as they're going through this phase? This is their first time through the flip. They want to get it done. They want to move on, but I'm telling them, hold strong a little bit. You're still early. You're still early on the average days on market. You know, our area is under around 30 to 40, depending on, I think Denton might be 33 right now.
Yeah.
They're up in this flips up in Denton. So you got any advice for our friend Rob?
How many days on market are they?
I think they're probably around 9. I didn't look it up, but if I remember right, they're about 9, 10, something like that. Yeah, they're early.
And how many showings have they had?
I don't know that specifically. They've had really good activity. I want to say, just based on what he's texted me a few times, I would venture a guess it's around 10.
And then
they've had some really good ones at open houses. Yeah.
And how many offers?
2 offers.
Two offers. I think they're doing great. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you know, it's all about getting people in the door that are willing and able to write an offer. So I think he's doing great. I don't think there's anything there to change. I think you just have to kind of sort through, you know, the right offer that makes sense. So yeah. I think he's doing fine. I mean, it's frustrating when you get showings, you get excited, you get an offer, you get excited, and then you start digging through it and you're like, oh man, you know, how do we make this thing work? So, you know, it's completely okay to have that anxiety, you know, that comes along with it, but I wouldn't sweat it. I would hold tight. I would hold steady where you're at, and, you know, get the, just wait on the right fit. You know, I think it's coming. I mean, you know, your marketing is doing what your marketing is supposed to do. You've had several showings. You've had 2 offers. You're on the market 9 days. You're doing great. You know, you just have to fit it. So did you mention that he can't go FHA because of the timeline? Was that? I
don't know about that. I think that's probably fine because they were sort of entertaining it, but I know that it just wouldn't really do financially for that flip what they needed to do. You know, they needed closing all costs. Their profits off. They needed closing costs, but I'm just saying the offer itself was just lower than what they could absorb on their flip. You know, I know they're pretty tight. It's their first one. It actually worked really fast. It was a pretty lipsticky one, but it looks great, clean, staged. Like they did it all right. You know,
and what's the price point?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm gonna lie to you.
And the only thing,
the link, I have to look at it. 400 probably.
Here's the caveat: is depending on what price point you're in, you have to understand that, you know, your target audience, right? If you're dealing with buyers in the first time home price point,
they definitely are.
Based on today's interest rate and based on the price points, right, at $300,000, $400,000. You're going to get asked, and there's a good chance you're going to get asked for closing cost contribution. It's just part of that audience, right? Yeah. In the sense that, you know, you've got somebody that's putting 3.5% down on FHA, you know, at a $300,000 home. You know,
they're $429. That's the list price, $429. They're 11 days on the market. I just looked at it.
So $429, you know, you're putting a pretty good chunk of money down at 3.5% down. You know, if it's a first time home buyer, you know, what I'm seeing right now is like the house I have in Wiley is at 600, and we're, you know, the offer that we got and executed, they're putting like 350,000 down. So
crazy.
You know, they had money from selling a house before, sitting there in the bank, and they're able to put that on it. So interest rate and all those things don't matter. It's just a different step, right? It's more of a second home. You know, it's not your first time home buyer typically,
right?
You know, but anyways, you just have to kind of prepare for that. You have to make sure that you know that if you're dancing in the first time home buyer price point, there's a good possibility that people are going to ask for closing costs. Because they just don't have, you know, $40,000 sitting around, right? Sure. I mean, they've saved up money, you know, 3.5% at 3% at 400, right, would be $12,000, and then another 0.5% times 3, you know, so like $15,000. So they get $15,000 plus closing costs. Closing costs is probably, now a lot of people, I want to mention this because I learned this early on in my career. When people mention closing costs, there's a lot of controversy that happens with that because people say, oh my God, I can't believe closing costs is $10,000. The kicker is closing cost is a broad term that combines both closing costs and prepaids. So where people get confused is prepaids is what is needed for escrows. So basically, and your insurance. So typically when you buy a house, you got to pay 1 year premium of insurance up front, and insurance has gone up. So in a lot of cases now, I mean, that number is going to be in the mid twos to, $3,000, if not more. So, that being said, you're paying that plus about 3 months of reserves. So you're paying $3,000 just for insurance. You're paying another, 3 months reserves. You're going to combine that together. And then you're talking taxes. So most of the time they're going to require at least 3 months of reserves and taxes. Sometimes they're going to require 6 months. It just kind of depends on the lender, depends on the time of year, all of those different things. Now, you do get a credit from the seller, depending on the time of year, that will offset some of that. So that is helpful. But that's just your prepaids. And then your closing costs are going to be your lender fees, your underwriting fees, your title insurance fees for the lender. The seller will pay title insurance for, the seller giving you an insurance policy, typically, if that's negotiated in the deal, which most of the time it is, that the seller's paying that title policy. But if they don't, then the buyer pays for it. So for instance, if you're buying a new build, the new build with most builders, they expect you to pay it. And that's part of their incentive package. If you use their lender, they'll pay for, the title policy. Well, if you're buying a traditional home, a lot of times sellers already expect to pay that for you because they're insuring good title for you to buy this property, that not going to have some long distance cousin come knock on your door and say, hey, I own this house. So anyways, that's important to understand of what closing costs and prepaids are and why they get so expensive. So, I mean, like I said, those could be $10,000, $12,000 sometimes between closing costs and prepaids added on top of your down payment requirement. So again, if you're a first-time home buyer, you may not have all this money stashed away to be able to pay all this closing costs out of pocket, right?
Yeah.
So it's important just to understand.
Yeah, well, that's a great explanation, to know exactly where all those fees, because it just does start adding up. You get that HUD statement, and it's like, well, that's different. And I thought it might be. But the moral of the story is hold strong, Rob. Yeah, you never know. The rates could dip 0.25% over a weekend. Everyone rushes out. They want to lock something up. You just never know how it's going to work. And I think you guys did a great job on the flip, and it staged well. You've done everything you can. You're getting people in the door. I think you're priced right. So
you get people in the door, and you got 2 offers. I mean, that means that what you did to the home is attractive. That means that you're priced right to get people in the door. That means that your marketing efforts are getting people in the door. So all those are the right things, and there's not much to change. You just have to kind of find that right fit. Make that right match happen. So.
Yep. All right. Well, we've gotten a little bit into it already, but why don't we touch a little bit more on a market update? So we got an update from Mr. Kearney over at Chicago Title. They send out a really cool
shout out.
We're going to a Mavs game soon. Figure out how to use Google Chrome at some point. We'll have you on the show. But we're going to a Mavs game soon. But they Chicago Title puts out a really cool synopsis, sort of just an interpretation of the market. And Tavis forwarded that to me. Kind of the sentiment, the question mark in the market right now is that inflation went up a little bit again. So all these strings that the Fed has been pulling, they're trying to slow down inflation through different rates and this and that. But the core inflation did go up a little bit, which means, the idea that during 2024, they're going to cut rates 5-6 times, we're going to float back down to 5 is not looking promising. It doesn't look like they're going to have to absolutely hammer the rate again and really start trying to slow the economy down yet. But the reality is that the job market reports keep being really strong, and now core inflation has gone up a little bit. So don't be surprised if at some point they have to do something about it. And I was actually looking at a chart, historical chart back in, I think, 1984. Interest rates were, or maybe it was 81, it was 18%. During 1992 to 2000, it floated right around where we are for those 8 years, the 7.25 to 8, somewhere in there. So we had a long run right through there. And that's actually when I was in Round Rock growing up, my formative years of middle school and high school through Round Rock and Austin. And, that's when Dell came in and that whole area was booming, just building houses left and right. So I think if you go through a long enough time and people, that's the norm, at some point the dam has to break. People are going to move. They're going to just go ahead and decide to take the leap. And more people are going to get comfortable with that. The 3% loans are going to get washed out of the market. So the logic of, well, why would I trade this in for that? That logic's going to, erode over time. So even if we floated around this rate for a while, I think that the volume's going to go up. Of course, the month over month volume is going up because we're going into spring. Although I think the year over year even is a little higher from what they're saying. So all that being said is the market's looking really strong. We're a seller's market, days on market. It's, like I said, different pockets. It's different numbers, but you're around the 33 to 40 range days on market. Still a strong seller's market. So I know Tavis is under contract at his house in Wiley, and you're also looking for a renter in Richardson for your midterm. You are searching for a renter. How long was this last one in there for you?
They were in there a little over 60 days. This last family, they had an issue. They had, some pipes burst in their home. They lived in Garland, not too far away, and needed temporary housing. So, it's weird to say renter because I kind of get my renters. I think of renters in my 12-month, my long-term stuff. I kind of say guest or family, in a way, because it's basically we're creating that temporary living situation, for somebody to transition in with a suitcase and basically live like it's, a luxury hotel, but with all the amenities they could think of to be able to have family over and cook and entertain and do all the things that they would normally do in their own home without, clutter, and having actually a 2-car garage that they could pull both cars into every day and, all of those things, So it was cool. These people gave me a really good review. They were a very, very nice family. They had really good things to say. They really enjoyed their stay, and it's always good to hear from a designer point. They're like, we're doing these things at our home, and we're influenced by certain things, so we're going to implement some of these things at our home. And another thing I always get, and kudos to Tabitha on this, but I get people say that the kitchen is more stocked than their primary home.
Nice.
So I'm like,
that's great.
Great job, Tabitha. Yeah. And she's good. Tabitha's the gadget queen. Like, she has all these different gadgets she's gotten over the years for certain things that do, specific things, right? So, and like the little funnels, that you use, but they're collapsible, like little rubber collapsible funnels, and
I haven't seen
stuff like that. Cool. Yeah. So, they fit in the drawer, and just different things like that. She has a lot of little fun little gadgets.
I tend to make a funnel out of my hand and just make a huge mess with flour and whatever I'm trying to put back in after I've mismeasured again. Yeah. So I need to look into the silicone funnel.
We're looking to our next family. We're past, we haven't had any bad weather in the last couple of weeks, but, things still happen. So,
fingers crossed, ice storm.
Yeah, they moved out. Friday, so we haven't been vacant very long. I had a couple of inquiries on it about a month ago that were a little premature on when they were trying to come in, and I'm starting to see corporate inquiries. Some different people that have reached out to me for business. That seems to be picking up. That wasn't there the last couple of years because of COVID. That seems to be picking up. It seems like I'm a little bit priced higher than some of their budgets allow. So we're running into that a little bit. And what we're seeing is people will have an allowance for instance, they've got $25,000, right? and their 25 grand ideally should cover them, like in my place, maybe like 4 months, right? But if they feel like they need 6 months, then we're priced out, right? Because they kind of give them like a solid number. Like, you got 25 grand, you do with what you want to find a place you want to go to. So some people are doing that, but there's other people in the market that were weekend stuff that's out on the market that's less expensive than us. Is not going to be as nice, but it's out there, so that there is housing available at a lesser number.
Well, hopefully we can get it filled soon.
We just got to you got to stay tight. Again, you got to prepare for this. We've talked about this before in these episodes. I would say now, a friend of mine called me this weekend and was considering taking one of his properties and converting it over to midterm. And so we did the math, and I said, realistically, you need to run it at 7 months occupancy and 3 months vacant, and run your numbers that way. And here's some realistic ideas of what you're going to spend in utilities, and do the math on it. And for him, in his case, because of what his price point was, it just didn't make sense. He was like, it makes more sense to take the loss on a 12-month without the headaches and without the upfront cost of doing furniture and decor and, stocking the home and keeping up with the upkeep and the maintenance and the cleaning fees and everything. It made more sense just to go to 12-month and take his annual loss that way based on his P&I versus, taking the potential risk of loss for a midterm. Right. So anyways, it was interesting. It was a way to kind of dive into it, look at it that way.
Yeah. I think we're going to get a little bit into some numbers later. I'm dealing with more and more investors. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official.
There's good news and bad news.
This is a massive story. Who wouldn't publish it?
We landed on the moon!
Man, I've got certain information, all right? Certain things have come to light.
And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Not a lot happening in the local news, except for we did read an article about there's a Chicago-based company that, I've heard this term. I would love to go drive one of these neighborhoods, but build to rent.
Yeah.
These are brand new neighborhoods that are being developed just like, your normal run-of-the-mill neighborhoods, it looks like, from the renderings, except for their townhomes and smaller single-family homes that are solely built to rent. And I'm assuming that these companies that are developing them, they're renting them out. I don't get the impression that these are sort of for sale to investors. This is just like a turnkey. They're doing everything, developing it, putting it up, renting it out, and this is sort of part of their portfolio. This Chicago company is committed to doing 408 units between, I think it said Frisco, Rowlett, and Fort Worth. So some decent sized neighborhoods there. We've talked several times about how overall we're undersupplied on units for housing by, in the millions across the United States. Some people say 4 to 6 million that we're undersupplied. And so I think we're going to see more and more of this. And I'm sure if they're doing it at scale, they're doing their management, obviously at pencils, or else they wouldn't have started from the beginning. But that's it's a cool concept. I just, you get a little nervous. These bigger and bigger companies are coming in and they're putting in these things. My question is, what is that neighborhood going to feel like in 15 years, 20 years? Is it age really well? Is it cool? Is it, a place that you're not going to want to build your forever home next to? I don't know. Like I assume that these have aged somewhere and you can kind of look at it, but I haven't ever experienced that. I know, there's parts of Plano that have your duplexes and townhomes for streets on end, and it doesn't feel amazing over there. But, that's why you have zoning laws and you have HOAs sometimes, and they keep some of those things in check. So it'll be interesting to see for sure.
A good friend of mine, Nick Good home team, also A&G Development, his brother, rest in peace, but his brother, Austin Good, was on the development investment side, and Nick's always kind of run the traditional side of real estate. But they have the only real estate podcast worth listening to. It's a mouthful. Yeah. I think they just call it the tour, or whatever.
It's
the
cool
tour
podcast.
The tour podcast. Anyways, we'll see if Nick will bless us and jump on the show at some point. But nevertheless, him and his brother bought into development. It was over 10 years ago up at Denton, and this was basically a single family duplex, build to rent community. So I think it started, I don't know if I believe, the first set, and this actually was a buddy of mine, Keith's development, and we've talked about having Keith on the show, but I think, it originally started with maybe like only 6 units, and then they sold the development off. Austin bought it, and then he took it off and started developing, and it's expanded. I forget how many units they have now, but it's a lot. And they've done a really good job with it, and have built it up and matured it. And, and basically that's what it is. It's all these, nice, 2-story duplexes. I've helped with some design stuff for them in their different phases over the years.
Do they keep them and manage them? Like that's in their portfolio?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's all. And they also have, Nick bought into a management company a few years ago, a property management company. So I don't know yet if that's managing his stuff yet, or if they're transitioning. I don't know what their contracts were that were in place, but nevertheless,
that's great.
They're all built up and they're built to rent.
Okay.
Now I will say this. So what's interesting is, even though that they're individually, platted, right? So technically you could sell off each half duplex separate, right? Because they're individually parceled. Because they own it the way they do in a portfolio type loan, the tricky part is when you go to sell, you can't cherry pick and sell off, 5 or 6 at a time, because they could sell to consumer buyers, right? That buy the home and live in it. But basically he's stuck in a position where if he sells the properties, it's a portfolio loan. So he's got to sell everything. He can't just sell a piece of it. So it's similar to multifamily in that sense, even though that they're single family entities and everything is individually metered and everything else. It just makes it a little bit more challenging when you go to turn that investment, as you were talking about before with these big developers. It basically just becomes, where you're looking for that next big investor that's coming in to look at it, similar to like multifamily. How many doors do you have? What's the net operating income? Yeah. What's the cap rate it's kicking out, and looking at that. So anyways, but I have seen it. I've witnessed it, and they've done a good job. They get a lot of college kids because it's up in Denton, right at the 288 loop. So they get a lot of people at the Women's University and North Texas University, and stuff like that. So,
yeah, for sure. The other article that came up, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit about. I think we'll expand on this as more of a full topic soon, but just because some of the clientele I'm working with currently, there's an article in the Bigger Pockets forums. There was actually an economist that lives in Dallas named Amy Nixon. She became pretty popular last year on Twitter because she coined the term AirbnBust, and a lot of people ran with it. And she actually did a ton of interviews. I remember seeing, she would pop up on CNBC and stuff like that. But I think she's based here. And this article was sort of tackling this idea of, did Airbnb go bust? The idea of the short-term rentals. And I'm sure different operators would tell you, different statistics, but the Bigger Pockets synopsis was, in general, it did not go bust like it was predicted. That being said, is that average rents are down from their height in, the COVID era, which, when everyone was wanting to go on vacation and stay away from people, they were willing to pay a little bit more. Things were really booked up and the rates went up. And so it's not even something that you can use as a barometer. I know our friend Aaron, who's doing the midterm rental, he has a couple of short terms, and we were talking to another investor the other day, and he said, you have to throw out the COVID years, go back to 19 and 18, see historical data then, and now you can compare that to now and kind of get an idea where you are. And if you can sort of get back to the 19 levels, then you're going to be doing okay. And so I think it was sort of clickbaity in a way to say, oh yeah, it's going down. Now, that being said, I think that during that rise of Airbnbs becoming super popular, the technology was newer, the cash flow was crazy during COVID. A lot of people who had extra money got into the game. And I'm sure there's some of them who just decided, this is not for me. This constant management and the complaints and sort of the managing your online ratings and all that sort of thing is difficult. And if that's not your personality, and the money has gone down a little bit, I think there are people who were saying, no, thank you. And then on top of that, you have just a regulatory environment where more and more cities are having to come up with their licensing and the rules. And so it's definitely difficult, but it's difficult in comparison to a very unrealistic time period where everyone was making money and a lot of cities had not come up with rules yet. And you weren't really having to come up against that as much. So yes, it's down, but overall, is it unhealthy? This article would argue against that. So did you have any thoughts after reading that, Tavis?
Yeah, my thought is, look, Airbnb became very easy for any individual that got a bright idea to Airbnb their house out. How many different people, that are not professionals, that have full-time jobs doing other things, that are like, oh man, I could make money, look at what they're charging per night. I can get $100 a night for my garage, okay,
right.
Let's do it. And I think it, unfortunately, it's just like anything. When you get, wildfire that spreads and everybody thinks it's easy and everybody jumps in the game and there's a handful of people that run it professionally as a business and know what they're doing. It was a new journey for Tabitha and I, even though we've been in the rental game for many years on the 12-month term, but we still understand, the concept, and we understand, presentation, we understand real estate, but you have to understand it deeper when you take on a challenge like that. Right. And I think one of the biggest things that we've seen just from our side of it is that so many people now want to walk these homes ahead of time because they don't trust Airbnb. They don't trust what's out there, because you have all these amateurs that have put property out there and the pictures look great and they walk it and they're like, this place is terrible. I want my money back. I want my refund. And so it's created havoc in the marketplace, and it's created havoc from the Airbnb side. It's created it from the guest side. I mean, you're an avid Airbnb dweller, right? When you travel for band. So you could probably speak on that, on your experiences of the ones that you've seen, and maybe what you have to do to dissect a little bit and go into the reviews. And I will tell you this as a host, and there's been a few tenants that I've had that I want to be a little bit more critical on, like how they lived, Yeah, right. At the end of the day, it's not my business, right? But I just know that there's been people that live a little bit more rough or not as neat and tidy as I would like to see. And so sometimes, more things get, that things are grungy, or it's going to take a lot more work to clean it and steam clean the carpets and do all these different things. But you have to be careful, because it asks me to kind of rate it. Now, I don't know how it does it, if it's simultaneously that it has the guest, write a review on me before I write a review on them. And maybe it is simultaneous. But I don't get to see their review unless I write a review. So you have to be somewhat strategic. So I could see it on the other side too. If you're a tenant and the landlord is terrible, like, it depends how much you travel and, what kind of review you're really going to write. If it was the best experience ever, or it wasn't so great, and how do you critique that? And I would say you're probably a good person to ask that question to, because you've stayed in some not so great ones. I mean, how did you review those?
I have never stayed in a horrible one, and we're also not, Karen 1952 that hates everything. It's like just like looking for stuff to. There's like the attitude is like, I don't even know if they're trying to find a discount early on, or that's just how they live. I just don't live that way. Now, it wasn't an Airbnb. The one time I've ever walked out of a hotel, Luke and Allie and I went down to Big Bend for a camping trip. This was actually right before COVID, but the choices down there were minimal. I didn't plan. It was kind of a last minute deal. We were going to camp. We went into this one hotel. I mean, it was rough, and it was not clean. The toilet paper roll even was like already unrolled, like halfway down to the floor. It was really weird. It was almost like they just didn't even clean it.
Like somebody was in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But they had said, oh yeah, it's right. It was like a real highway motel type place. So we walked out, we went somewhere else. after that. It was funny, but that was the roughest thing. The last one we went to was over in Indianapolis.
Like a per hour hotel? Was it that
Yeah,
bad?
it was kind of per hour. Yeah, it was sort of that. There was like people out, literally, it was like they were tailgating in the parking lot. They had a huge boom box. It was super loud. They're out there grilling and stuff. It was different. But, we went to the one in Indianapolis. It was clean, but when you said Tabitha gets, credit for really stocking the kitchen, I mean, that's really, I would say that's a lot of times when it really falls apart. They'll have the cheapest sheet pan, one little bitty set of just the cheapest silverware that'll cut your finger if you hold it wrong on a fork. And, they don't have any supplies, and they just do the minimum to say, we have a stocked kitchen. Now, on the other side, I remember vividly one of our very first Airbnbs we went to in Winter Park. It was amazing. They had thought about every little thing that we might, they had a meal that we could cook late at night if we got in from the airport late. It had the spaghetti stuff and all that stuff. Great coffee bar. They had these little take with you packets of sunscreen that had a little on the wall. There was like individual packets of sunscreen. It's like, hey, go out for the day to make sure you if you didn't bring sunscreen, here you go. Like it was so cool. Had a great book to explain everything. They had the LED lights and it was just fun. And they had really thought, it was like, man, this is a professionally managed, run, well thought out place. And so when you see that end of it and then you see the other, then, you go back and forth. But I think at the end of the day, it's just not for some people, and like anything, if it makes a lot of money, there's some sort of either risk or effort that has to go into it,
Yeah.
And I think that the rubber meets the road after a while. It's like, it's just not worth it for us. Megan and Dustin, they're experienced investors, and Megan's a great designer, and, they had an Airbnb in Pflugerville down in Austin that they're selling, and it was still cash flowing some, but it just wasn't worth it overall for them. The experience just was not worth it, and having to deal with randos making weird, reviews. And it was just, at some point, it's just like, no thanks. But that being said, like I said, we've been dealing with, Aaron, he has one up in the Smokies. I've got another buddy, Josiah. He's got, I think, 8 in the Smokies. They do well, and they're in the rhythm, and they've got their people, and it just like really works. So I think moral of the story is, I don't think it's just this huge exodus from the space,
And I would say this, I think, Airbnb and VRBO obviously started in the destination spots, right? And those, I think, are still strong markets because, people were traveling there for a reason, and, they're coming to, spend time, with their family, beach resorts or the Smokies or, ski resorts, all that stuff is, destination driven of why people travel and go to those places versus, every Paul, Dick, and Harry, that decided to go ahead and rent out their, their house and upgrade to another home or their garage apartment or their basement or what have you. And there's no regulation. I mean, there's nothing that really keeps you from building a profile on Airbnb as a host and signing on and uploading pictures and saying, oh, I can rent my place out now.
I always thought that was such a weird recommendation. I would listen to a Bigger Pocket. This is a couple years ago. I'd listen to a Bigger Pockets podcast, and, some guy, single guy, I guess, while he's living at his house, he's like, well, I'd sleep on the couch out front and I'd rent out my bedroom. I'm like, well, first of all, who are you? Second of all, who is the person who is renting a back room while you're up front? You're sharing the kid. I was like, look, that's definitely not for everyone. That's probably not even for many people. And but this whole, I'm going to house hack. I'm going to do my best to like make an extra $300 this month. I mean, I'm sure it works for some people, but anyway, it's an interesting world. And I hope to get into the short-term world at some point to have the income to go ahead and get into something. And actually, I was talking, recently, one of my long-term dreams would be to have some sort of boutique hotel, because I just love that experience idea, giving someone an experience like you're talking about, and helping someone enjoy their trip even that much more through curation, I think is super cool. And that's why I love Disney World and Universal and all that, because they're just amazing at it. And they can transport you for this little, hour-long thing to a different place. And I think if you can do that for people and you can really care, it adds value to people's life, and it's not just this transaction. So I hope to do that at some point.
Yeah.
Well, today we are going to do something we may not do every time, but we're going to try to get into sort of a community profile. And, a lot of people are moving into town. Lately, I've been dealing with a lot of investors, and I just had a whole day on Monday where I got to travel around and show off our area to a couple from California. Shout out to Tim and Johanna if they are listening. They're traveling to Houston yesterday and today to check out Texas. So they're originally, he's from Holland, she's from Peru. They met in Canada. Now they live in California, but they want to move to Texas. And so they are packing in so much to this trip. They flew to Dallas. They wanted to drive down to Houston. They may make their way back up through Austin. It's like, well, you're getting it's like fire hydrant Texas, but they are going to stop. They were supposed to stop at Buc-ee's yesterday. So we had barbecue Monday night. They're going to Buc-ee's, and I think they're going to go down to Houston, check out NASA maybe. I don't know, but it'll be a lot of fun for them. But I've been talking a lot about different parts of town, cities, and all this. And so I think we're going to tackle a town here and there and just kind of give you an update on why we like it, what the highlights are, and the basic facts of it. So today we're going to pick Richardson. Richardson is in the northeast corner of Dallas. If you're looking at a map of Dallas, look at downtown Dallas, just a little bit north and maybe just slightly east. You're going to hit Richardson. Honestly, the population's under 200,000, so it doesn't seem that big, but it's one of those towns that you sort of drive in and out of, and you never really know where it starts and stops. It's just completely absorbed by Dallas, DFW area. But I love Richardson, and I flipped my 2 houses ago. It was in Richardson. I was over there a ton. I grew to really, really like the house. I helped our friends Josh and Krista find a place over in Richardson after they sold their house there. So spent a ton of time there from a retail side and from the investor side. To give you an idea just of pricing, I looked up on the MLS. The most expensive house for sale in Richardson right now is $2.4 million. It's up in the Firewheel area. So if you go to the far north part of Richardson, actually on the other side of George Bush Tollway there, it actually has a little panhandle section up in Firewheel. There's some nice neighborhoods there. So $2.4 million is the most expensive. The least expensive house you can buy in Richardson right now is $300,000, 3-bed, 2-bath in the south central part of Richardson, definitely the older part. You're probably late 60s, early 70s build down there. So that gives you a context of your price ranges. They have some really great elementary schools. Tavis and I were looking at, there's some 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 elementary schools. And then, of course, by the time kids quit caring, the high school is 4 out of 10, most across the board. J.J. Pierce is still supposed to be a very good high school. People love that high school, but from a rating standpoint, it's not amazing. That being said, there's people I'm sure that wouldn't trade it for the world, because I've heard so many good things about it. And it's probably one of those things is once you get plugged in, find your place, and you can do great things there, or you can just not care. So that's probably a lot of the public high schools in our area. So Tavis, why do you, I know you do a lot of business in Richardson. What are the things about Richardson that you like?
Well, I think geographically, Richardson is kind of bordered on Dallas by 2 sides. On the south side, as well as the west side of Richardson is bordered by Dallas. Now, technically, the west side, close enough on one point ends up being kind of Addison, but Addison's also known as Dallas, right? But nevertheless, so it's kind of bordered by 2 sides there. The majority of it is in Dallas County. I believe parts of it are in Collin County. And then on the north side, it borders Plano. And then on the east side, basically borders Garland. So Garland kind of wraps around it, if you will. And even a sliver of it might actually hit the corner of Murphy, Saxey, that kind of thing, I think, up in the top side. But anyways, geographically, it's a great location. Parts of Dallas, I mean, like the property I have in Richardson, that is my midterm rental, is only like 15-20 minutes from downtown Dallas. So geographically, great location. It's basically right as you get north of one of the first loops that we have in our area, which is known as 635, and just reaching north of there. I will say that the school district's quite large, and there's areas of Lake Islands, which is Dallas, East Dallas, Northeast Dallas. And that is, if that's going to go to Richardson ISD. You have parts of Garland that are Richardson ISD. You have parts of, Plano that are, Plano and other parts of Dallas that are Richardson ISD. As you get into Addison or closer to Addison, it bleeds over into Richardson ISD as well. So anyways, it's quite large. And what I've seen is that there's parts of Richardson that are now becoming kind of the new area of demand as far as like tearing down and rebuilding, right?
Yep.
You've got an area that's Northwood. It's called Northwood. I believe that's what it is. Northwood Hills. That's up kind of in between like Hillcrest and Coit. And that area that's kind of right on, again, on the edge of Dallas, blending into Richardson. That's really cool. Big, like acre lots and lots of mature trees and some rolling hills and some really cool spots. And then you've got, areas like Canyon Creek, obviously a big golf course, and they just spent a tremendous amount of money revamping the golf course and the clubhouse. And, like you mentioned, you got great schools, but you got to think these homes were built anywhere from, I believe, like the 60s. I don't think there was a lot of homes built in the 50s. And of course, you have like the east side of 75, and then you have the west side of 75 as well. But, a lot of the homes were built in the 60s and the 70s, some in the 50s. But, that's giving it time for these, big tree-lined streets and, these big mature trees that, it's completely shaded and there's a lot of character. And then you've got areas like the reservation, and for instance, that a lot of people have torn down and rebuilt, custom homes, and they don't have a golf course, they're just infill lots. And then of course you get into Canyon Creek and you're seeing a lot more tear down rebuilds, on the golf course primarily, but also there's some infill stuff going on as well. Yeah. But I kind of see that trickling north, right? So eventually I believe that's gonna bleed into Plano. We're going to start seeing that trend here in the next 10 years of people tearing down and rebuilding infill lots in Plano, just as we've seen in Dallas, and just as the cost of land gets more expensive, people want more of that luxury home, and for what they're paying for the price point, you can see more of that happening. So
yeah, no, that's a good look. I mean, I've always kind of compared Richardson to a little bit of Austin feel. I grew up in Austin. It has a funky feel in that there's not a ton of HOAs, but in a lot of the neighborhoods, it's aged well. You could go the other way when there's no HOAs, but it's unique. You have just kind of an artistic feel in some of the houses where they've got cool sculptures out front every once in a while. You got some really cool local restaurants, and there's Lockwood Distillery, and you've got, your Alamo Draft houses over there. They've really started to develop these cool just pockets of interesting restaurants and places to hang out. So love Richardson. I like it I would live there. I would definitely live, several places over there. And it's a great place to invest, I think, because, we've both done it successfully over there. And so whatever you're looking to do, don't sleep on Richardson. Well, that will do it for us today. I know you've probably seen it on social. We hit 1,000 downloads this last week. We cannot thank you enough for the support. I think we have some new listeners because we've had a few people really go out of their way to share it. So if you're new, thank you so much for being here. Share it with a friend. We try to keep this coming to you every week. We've got some great interviews coming to you. So if you do not know, I'm Ashton Hines on Instagram. I'm the Dallas real estate guy. Tavis is Tavis Westbrook, Travis without the R. He has Tavis Westbrook Designs. He does design work. He can help you with blueprints and all sorts of renderings. He flips. He has commercial building. He has a ton of knowledge. I work a little bit more on the retail side. Lately, I'm working with a lot of investors calling me. I'm working with a ton of people who are looking for real estate to help with their tax situation, which is a lot of fun. I think we're going to dive into the math of that sometimes. So follow us on social. That's kind of where we keep everyone up to date on our projects and what's going on. If you have not, please give us a review on the platform, either on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to it. That does a lot for us. And then copy and paste the link and send it to a friend. Say, please listen to it. It's a great podcast. These guys are great. So if you would do it, it would make us feel wonderful. And we're just going to keep it rolling. And then we're going to get to 2,000 downloads before long. So thank you guys so much. Hope you have a great week. And we'll talk to you next time.
Later.